When you think of Vikings, you probably picture brutal raiders with axes and horned helmets, right? But what if I told you that these so-called barbarians were actually some of the most sophisticated traders and financiers of the medieval world? The Vikings didn't just steal wealth, they created it. And the financial systems they developed over 1,000 years ago still influence how we do business today. Let's dive into the untold story of Viking economics. Welcome to Financial Ancientist, where we explore how ancient civilizations handled money, trade, and economics, and what we can learn from them today. I'm breaking down the Viking Age economy, their currency systems, trade networks, and the brilliant financial innovations that made them wealthy beyond imagination. Hit that subscribe button, because we're about to discover how Vikings became the venture capitalists of medieval Europe. Between 793 and 1066 AD, Vikings from Scandinavia, modern-day Norway, Sweden, and Denmark created one of the most extensive trade networks the world had ever seen. Think about this. Vikings traveled from North America in the west to Central Asia in the east. They traded in Baghdad, Constantinople, and even reached the borders of China. That's over 6,000 miles of trade routes. But here's what made them different from other traders. They controlled both ends of the supply chain. What did Vikings trade? Exports from Scandinavia. Furs, beaver, marten, fox, luxury items in medieval Europe. Amber, called northern gold, highly valued in jewelry. Walrus, ivory. Before African ivory dominated, this was premium. Slaves, unfortunately, a massive part of their economy. Iron and timber, raw materials. Imports to Scandinavia. Silver, their primary currency. Silk and spices from the east. Wine from Francia and the Mediterranean. Glass and ceramics. Weapons and jewelry. The Vikings were essentially running international arbitrage. They'd buy cheap in one market and sell expensive in another, the exact same principle that drives modern commodity trading. Here's something fascinating. Vikings didn't really have coins for most of their history. Instead, they used what's called a bullion economy, or hacksilver economy. How it worked. Silver was the standard of value. They carried small scales and weights everywhere. When you wanted to buy something, you'd cut off a piece of silver jewelry or a coin, whatever you had. You'd weigh it, and that determined the price. This is why it's called hacksilver, literally hacking pieces off. Think about that. Every Viking merchant was essentially a walking bank, carrying their wealth on their body as jewelry, arm rings, and neck rings. The dirham connection. Most Viking silver came from Islamic coins called dirhams from the Abbasid Caliphate in Baghdad and Persia. Archaeologists have found over 85,000 Islamic coins in Scandinavia. Why? Because Vikings traded extensively along the Volga River trade route, selling furs and slaves to Arab merchants in exchange for massive quantities of silver. This created one of history's first truly globalized economies. Islamic silver, Viking labor and goods, Byzantine silk, and Chinese ceramics all flowing through the same trade networks. The birth of Viking coins. By the late 900s, Vikings started minting their own coins, copying designs from Anglo-Saxon England, Frankish Europe, Islamic dirhams. Kings like Olaf Tryggvason and Sven Forkbeard produced coins to legitimize their rule and standardize trade. This was a huge step towards centralized monetary policy. Hedeby, the Wall Street of Vikings. The Vikings established permanent trading posts that functioned like medieval stock exchanges. The most important was Hedeby in modern-day Germany. Hedeby's features. Population of 1,000 to 1,500, huge for the time. Protected harbor for ships. Artisan workshops for metalwork, glass, and jewelry. International merchant quarter. Defensive walls and infrastructure. Other major trading hubs included Birka, Sweden, gateway to the east. Kaupang, Norway, North Sea trade. Dublin, Ireland, slave trade center. Novgorod, Russia, the road to the Greeks. The Varangian route. One of the most profitable trade routes was what historians call the Varangian route, or road from the Varangians to the Greeks. Swedish Vikings, called Rus, traveled down Russian rivers, Volga and Dnieper, to reach the Caspian Sea, Persia, and Baghdad. The Black Sea, Constantinople. Byzantium. They traded so much with Byzantium that the Byzantine emperor hired Vikings as elite bodyguards, the famous Varangian Guard. These were basically paid mercenaries, earning massive salaries in gold. Some of these Vikings became so wealthy they returned home and built churches, raised runestones, and became local aristocracy. Vikings didn't have banks, but they had something just as important: reputation-based credit. In saga literature and runic inscriptions, we see evidence of debt obligations recorded on wooden tally sticks, partnership agreements for trading voyages, like early joint ventures, inheritance laws that were surprisingly complex. If you borrowed silver for a trading expedition and didn't repay, your reputation was destroyed. In a tight-knit society, that was financial death. Risk pooling. Vikings often invested in ships and cargo as groups. Multiple merchants would pool resources to buy a ship, stock it with trade goods, share profits upon return. This is essentially a joint stock company centuries before the Dutch East India Company made it famous. If the ship sank or was raided, everyone shared the loss. If it returned with profits, everyone got their share. This is modern portfolio diversification in the Viking Age. Women in Viking finance. Unlike most medieval societies, Viking women could own property, run businesses, and control finances. When men went on trading voyages, sometimes for years, women managed farms and estates, local trade, finances, and debt collection. Some women became wealthy merchants in their own right. The famous Oseberg ship burial contained an incredibly rich woman, possibly a merchant queen. 1. Diversification works. Vikings never relied on one trade route or product. They spread risk across multiple ventures, just like modern investors should diversify portfolios. 2. Network effects. Vikings built trust networks across thousands of miles. In finance today, your network is still your net worth. 3. Portable wealth. Vikings wore their wealth as jewelry, liquid, portable, and always accessible. Today's equivalent? Diversified assets you can access anywhere. 4. Global thinking. A Viking from a tiny village in Norway thought globally. They saw opportunity everywhere. That mindset built wealth then, and it builds wealth now. 5. Reputation is currency. Without banks or contracts, Vikings relied on reputation. In today's digital economy, your reputation, your personal brand, is more valuable than ever. The Vikings weren't just warriors. They were merchants, financiers, and economic innovators who connected the medieval world through trade. They proved that wealth isn't just taken, it's created through networks, trust, and smart financial thinking. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Viking economics, smash that like button and subscribe to Financial Ancientist for more stories about how ancient civilizations handled money. Next time, we're exploring how the Medici Bank of Renaissance Italy basically invented modern banking. You won't want to miss it. Thanks for watching. And remember, history doesn't repeat, but financial principles echo through time.